Today on the show, strategy plus action equals closing your prospect before they even know what you sell. Great coaches and consultants like you have the ability to change people's lives and transform entire organizations. And your impact can often go far beyond the clients you work with. One of the reasons I love working with coaches and consultants is because of that ripple effect. This show is here to highlight your expertise and empower you with resources and new ideas to grow your business. Welcome to Strategy in Action. Today we're talking about crafting this amazing statement for your business that instantly gets people closed, interested. I want that thing before they even hear what it is, know what it is, get them bought in before one detail about the how. Nkiruka, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is a blast. We had the good fortune to connect on LinkedIn, where I've met some amazing people lately, yourself included. Had the good fortune to hear your presentation the other day in an H7 group. And wow, I just love this idea that we're going to get into today of really closing that potential client, that closing them before they even really know what you do. You know, and it's one thing to get sort of hooked into a presentation with a nice hook like that, right? It's another thing to then go, oh wow, yes, you know, when you deliver on that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so I want us to dig into that, and maybe that's where we can start with things. But I also want to dig into that full big picture of how you're helping clients and how you're helping them do this, and kind of the journey that got you to figuring out this very smart formula or framework that you've really been able to help people with, help businesses with. So what is that main thing you're doing now, and kind of what got you into that?
Yeah, so I help service providers, so basically innovators, so anyone who has an incredible or exceptional or breakthrough, groundbreaking product or service. And I define exceptional as it's just patently superior to any other option your target client has for solving their biggest problem. Just because it's proprietary, you've put so much into it, you did the research, you did the studying to really create something that solves the problem better than anything else. And so I help people who have products and services like this, but who have trouble explaining them because they're so complex. So typically when you have this level of innovation, this level of insight and power in something you're providing to the market, it's typically very complex. There's a lot that went into it. And so the explanation becomes the bottleneck in actually bringing those clients in. Either it takes too long to explain, or you can explain it so that people understand it, but they don't move forward and become a client. And so that's the problem, because it's a very different thing to explain something so that people understand it, or rather it's one thing to explain something so that people understand it. It's a very different thing to explain it so that they want it.
To make that
completely.
to make that connection.
Yeah. And you can actually explain it. Yeah. And you can actually explain something so they want it without them really having all the details of what it is or does. And so that's what we mean by close before the demo, or close before they know what your service even does. And so that's what I help people. That's what I help people do.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so intriguing, and then to have a solution, because we hear that a lot. Like, I think a lot of coaches and experts out there, you know, are constantly shaking people to stop getting bogged down in the details, right? Of what they offer when they're talking to somebody. And we have to keep getting slapped in the face to remember that. But I think what's amazing with this is this really gives us that framework to do it, you know, to finally rise above all of that, get out of our own, you know, knowledge base of this thing that we're selling, and just create this intriguing statement that kicks in that part of the brain where, emotionally they're like, oh yeah, what, okay, tell me more about that. Like, yeah, that's what I need, or whatever that may be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of just like, by paragraph 4 that you're explaining it to them, they're just like dozing off and,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what's interesting about the framework that I created, and it took me 3 years to not 3 years to figure it out, but really to figure out how to teach it to people, is that it's not, a lot of people think that all they need is a hook. They just need to kind of pique curiosity or pique someone's interest. This is not that, because you can pique someone's interest all day. That doesn't mean that they're sold on the value of what you're offering. What we want is for them to fully understand, know, and believe the value of what you offer instantly, the first time you meet them. And so this idea of closing before they know what your service is means you're closing them in the very first encounter that you ever have with a prospect, because you don't know if you're going to get another chance to discuss what you're doing. So you're closing them in that very first encounter. And what that really means is, are they going to buy and like throw thousands of dollars at you right then and there? Not necessarily, maybe, but not necessarily. But what it does mean is that when they do come to the demo or they do come to the conversation, they already know that they want to invest. They're already sold. They're already convinced. And so now this is just them doing due diligence. And that's a very different conversation, a very different experience from having to pique their interest to get them on the call or the sales presentation or whatever your closing mechanism is. And then once they're there, to then try to convince them by showing them all the features and, aspects of your service. So what we really want is to really do all of that, explain the service in such a way that they're already sold, because it's clearly better than anything else they've ever seen. They didn't even know it was possible, because that's the type of service you have. Communicate that up front, and then everything else is much easier. I mean, whatever the metric is for your sales process, whether you just need more leads, and that's going to increase your sales. And some people just need a better close rate. So they need to know what to say to convince people. You're saying that immediately. So then that helps with the sales. So it just helps with wherever that mechanical bottleneck is in your sales process. And it looks different for every client in every situation, but that's kind of the overview of how it works.
Yeah. And I love that, because we all know that difference in energy, right? When you're chasing someone, trying to convince someone, and like, no, but and you're just like, you're trying to handle every objection and all of that, versus they're asking you questions, right? And you're just answering questions. They're already bought in. They know they need this. They just want to know how it works, maybe, and maybe a couple of things to ease their mind a little bit, but they're already bought in. Like you said, they're closed, from that beginning. And then it's details after that. And that's so powerful. And so if you're willing to share that framework, and we can kind of start there, because so many little nuggets and details and questions I have around that kind of stem from that. And that would help people not, that way we're not talking in vagueness about it.
Yeah. What I'd love to do before I even jump into the framework is really to share why I do this. It's because I love innovation. I love services, products that are really, really exceptional. And I've always been fascinated by the challenge in communicating that. Like, why is it so hard to communicate that? Why does it take so long? And I had one of my first clients was struggling to build his business. And he went through my process and got some really exceptional results. And so I had asked him, I remember I was sitting on a Zoom call. I just asked him if he, would do a case study for me, a testimonial. And he said a sentence to me that really captures why I do this. And so after sharing how this had exploded his sales, he simply said to me, I would crawl through glass to help you. And that really, I think for the first time I truly understood, even though I knew that it had helped his business and we had the metrics and everything. He went from something like one lead per quarter, which is insane, to 15 leads per quarter just by using his close before the demo statement, changing nothing else. He didn't talk to any more people. He didn't do any more hustling or networking. Same volume of people, same amount of conversations. He just changed what he was saying to people, and he got that basically that quantum leap in value. And that's because, you know, his product is incredible. His service is incredible. But when he told me I would crawl through glass to help you, that's when I saw like the real potential of this of this framework, which I'm about to explain, to really transform people's businesses essentially overnight. Because as soon as he started using his statement, that's when everything just shifted immediately. It didn't take time to ramp up, because it's one conversation is all it takes to see the difference and see the impact. So the framework,
that does that, but that speaks to. It's kind of back to what we're talking about with the framework, right? It speaks to the emotional impact. Yeah, there's the numbers. Yeah. Cool, your business is doing better, but the emotional impact of this solution, like, oh my gosh, this is what my business can be now. I mean, as a business owner, that's everything. That allows you to go to sleep at night, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's so powerful.
That's what he told. I didn't know that, actually. And he was actually my first test case that actually proved how powerful this is. Up until I met him, I only kind of theoretically knew it. Like, I just knew it in my gut, but I needed like outer world proof. And so when he got that proof, and went from like 1 lead per quarter, the way it started ramping up was he started getting 1 lead per week. And this is for a 6-figure, I think at the time it was like 5 or 6-figure service. He does IT asset management, works with large corporations. So go from 1 lead per quarter to about 1 lead per week. And this is the first 6 weeks of 2020, which is before the pandemic started. And then things kind of slowed down during the pandemic, but then, you know, once the vaccines and everything came out and things started opening back up, he said it was just off from there, and it hasn't let up since. And he recently told me that he grew his company 5x in 2 years. And from the time that, you know, just after we'd started working together is when the growth started. But he said he'd been struggling for a number of years before we met, and was wondering if this was even the right business or thing to be pursuing. And I didn't know that. And that really just opened my eyes about like the impact that this can have. And he's brilliant, right? Like I talked at the outset that this is, you know, if you're this type of consultant, you really have a brilliant product or service that really creates exceptional results, a quantum leap in value for your customers. They should be reacting like this. If you're not getting that flood of interest, something is wrong, and I want to help you fix it. That's basically what I got. And so he was also sharing that the confidence, because like there's so many aspects when you're struggling to explain what you do and you know it's amazing, but people keep kind of walking away like, oh, that's nice, or they're like, oh, that's interesting, maybe I'll refer you to this person. And it's not like they're not lighting up like, oh my goodness, tell me more. It kind of rocks your confidence a little bit, and you kind of start questioning. And that's what he shared with me. You start questioning, like, you know, he would kind of go through the motions, but he kind of already knew that people weren't going to have, you know, such an enthusiastic reaction. So it would kind of like wait on him. But once he found his close before the demo statement, he just knew, because every time he told someone, they'd be like, I'm sorry, what do you do? How does that work? It was just a very different response. So that's
fantastic. Magical. Because because we, even if we know better, logically, we still have that identity tied in with our service, our offering, our company. And so there's an emotional component there that can be linked in to that constant rejection. But also you start questioning everything. You're like, okay, I think on paper this thing is great, but obviously something's wrong. Yeah. And so, your brain is constantly going down that list. Well, am I talking to the wrong people? Is it my service? Is it not as great as I think it is? When you can solve all of that in one fell swoop, right? You know,
Yeah.
That's so strong.
Yeah. I love it. Such an awesome story, for sure.
Yeah. So walk us through this
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
framework a little bit.
Yeah. So the framework is how to close customers before they see the product demo. And if you're a consultant, how to close clients before they know what your service is. And essentially what this means is, so there are two pieces: closing clients before they know what your service is. So what does it mean to close clients? Let's look at the first piece. So to close a potential client, basically they know that they want to invest in what you're offering. I always say that there are three things that you need to prove to their satisfaction within their logical framework, within the way that they think. So you can't prove it and say like, well, I've made my case. I believe it's logically cogent. It's not what you think. It has to be what they think. So we want to use their logic. So the first thing you want to prove is that your service is better than what they're doing now, and better means faster or easier. So the first thing you would ask yourself is what you're offering, does it make things faster or easier for your target client? So you got to prove to them using their logic that it's better than what they're doing now. And then number two, that it's better than any other solution or alternative they know or might try for solving the same problem. And that might be more than just your service. You know, it could be your service. Maybe there's a product that they'll try to use, or maybe there's some other way that they could dream up to solve it. And you have to be aware of all of these different ways of potentially solving the problem. And there could be a lot of them. So that's why this, it can be a little tricky to figure out what to focus on. So better than what they're doing now.
Expanding beyond, other people doing what you think is the same as you or similar to. Yeah,
Exactly.
it could be it could be a physical product that they're looking to use instead of your service. It could be as wild as that. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a really great point, because if we're thinking from within your customer's logical frame, they're not necessarily thinking I need service that does XYZ to solve this problem. They're thinking I need solution to this problem. What does that look like? Could be anything. It might be as narrow as, yes, I always need a certain type of service, or there may be other things that they are thinking about as a solution. So that's why we need to account for that, because when your solution pops up on their radar, they're going to be comparing it not just to everything that's similar to you, but similar to not even similar, but they're going to be comparing it to everything they have available at their disposal to solve it. Okay, so those are the two hurdles, the first two hurdles. Better than what they're doing now. Number two, better than anything else they know or might try. And number three, that you have to prove that it's worth the investment, that it's worth it's worth what they will pay to have your solution. So what that means is that it's a combination of communicating so much value in 1 and 2 that whatever you're charging, as long as it's not like, astronomical, like, $1 trillion or something like that, but it has an ROI built in. So typically I like to see 5x to 20x ROI. So if it helps them make money, then, maybe off the top of my head, you're charging $5,000 for something that helps them make $100,000 in 6 months, and it's provable and measurable and all of that. But it's obvious to them in the moment when you say what you do, right? So these are the things that we want to prove: better than what they're doing now, better than anything else they know or might try, and it's worth the investment. And so that's what it takes to close someone. Just roughly speaking, you got to prove those three things. So that's where they're looking like, I don't know. Do I need to stop what I'm doing to use your solution? Okay. If I stop what I'm doing, do I need your solution, or could I just use something else that's similar but cheaper, or similar but faster? Right. So we want to kind of we're going to handle all those objections immediately. And that's how that's the first piece is the close. And then what we do is we do the close in the very first encounter. So that's what closing before the demo, or before they know what your service is. that's what that means, is that we do that really at the first moment, the first time we meet them or that they meet us.
Yeah. Are you at this stage, are you also accounting for the investment of time at this stage? Are you trying to both in terms of, because everyone's also always comparing, okay, if I do nothing compared to doing this, is part of that. But yeah, there's a dollar amount ROI, but there's also inherently in whatever we do often a just time component, an effort or perceived effort. Are we tackling any of that in this first section as well?
We are. So the trick, and I'll actually explain how to prove those three things in the first encounter. But the trick is that if you do 1 and 2 in a specific way, 3 is kind of automatically handled. It almost becomes like a moot point, or like not something you have to worry about. Just assuming that you've properly priced your service and that it doesn't take an unreasonable amount of time for them to get the result, right? If we're assuming that, because that's what makes it exceptional, right? Is that it works fast, or it's easy, and the speed and the ease is such a contrast to their status quo that it's worth their investment of time and money to have it. So I'll give an example of this. So my client that I mentioned, he works in IT asset management. If you do your IT asset management right, you can save a lot of money off of your IT budget. That's what he would tell people. You can save up to 30% off your IT budget for your company. So his target customer is CIOs of large companies. The problem is CIOs don't think in terms of IT asset management because that's not a high priority problem for them. So I forgot to mention this. You want to make sure that the problem you're targeting is a high priority problem for your target customer. They already consider it a priority and are already eager and actively trying to solve it or actively wanting to solve it. So for this target customer, CIOs, their issue is, out of control IT budgets. It's just well known in the industry, like, saving, being more efficient in how you're spending for IT departments of large corporations, large companies. So my client makes that proof better than doing what they're doing now, better than anything else they might try, and it's worth the investment. His close before the demo statement. So this is what he started saying to CIOs when he would do networking events. And all he did was say this thing, and he shot up from 1 lead per quarter to 15 per quarter, purely on the basis of this idea. He would explain his service as, I help you cut your software spending without buying less software. And when people hear that, they're like, how can I spend less on software without buying less of it? And that was the magic, right? Because if they are trying to cut their software spend, right, that's the high priority problem. It does proof number 1, which is it's better than what they're doing now. Now, if they're trying to spend less on software, whatever they're doing now, they're probably thinking that they have to buy less of the software, just cut back on purchasing, cut back on usage, cut back, right? That's how they're thinking of it. So they're not doing that. And we knew that beforehand, right? We baked this in because we know how the customer looks at solving the problem. Number 2, it's better than anything else they know or might try because, again, any other solution that they can think of or that they might know of to cut spending would require buying less software as well. And the reason both 1 and 2 both have that quality is because logically, to spend less or cut spending on X, you would think you would need to buy less of it. That's the core logic of that. What my client's service actually does is it actually violates that logic. That's the magic. It violates that basic logic that to cut spending on something, you need to buy less of it. He's like, no, you can buy the same amount and we're going to cut the spending. Same amount, same quality. We're not using like discount coupons here. Same amount, same quality of software. And I'm going to cut your spend by millions of dollars. Right. That's the incredible thing that he does for his customers. Now, that, and he's priced it reasonably, right? So people hear that and it's automatically worth whatever he's probably charging, right? So he's charging, at the time he was charging like 6 figures, or about 5 figures, 6 figures now, for an engagement. But for a large company, right, that's generating millions, tens of millions, however much revenue the entire company generates, the ability to save money in this way, spend less on software without buying less software, that's magic. It's like he's making money out of thin air. And so what that created, that differential where people can figure out, how are you doing that? And that's when he got to tell them, he would then be able to explain how his methodology for IT asset management works. But now they want it. They don't want it because it's IT asset management, which is what he does. They want it because he's a magician who helps them cut their software spend without buying less software. And so I kind of touched on it before, but it's the core of the framework is a logical contradiction. So it's, how are you delivering the high priority problem in a way that logically contradicts the way a reasonable person would assume the problem is solved. So this is not about pain points. This is not about reducing stress or hassle or anything like that. This is much deeper. This is about the logic of it, sometimes the physics of it. There are different archetypes for these contradictions, which maybe we'll get into a little bit later, but it has to feel and sound and literally be a contradiction when people hear it. And that's what snags them and makes them realize that they've never heard of anything like this before, because they haven't. Your service is exceptional. Nothing else does what it does. And so they should have the reaction that they've never heard of it before. And the reason the framework is even possible is because every innovation, and this is kind of my working hypothesis that continues to be proven out with the clients I work with, every innovation has at its core a contradiction that precisely captures how it's able to deliver that quantum leap in value. And if you communicate that contradiction in a way that's sort of correctly worded and stated for your target customer, then you will get that immediate increase in leads, sales, revenue, et cetera, whatever your growth metrics are. And there's some quirks and nuances, which are even saying like the wrong word or like not using the right term can kind of throw things off. So this is super precise. That's why it's really important for the people that I work with, my clients, for them to really know their target customer really well. And of course they do, because they're the ones who created this thing that gets them incredible results. But to really understand how they look at the problem, how they evaluate the range of solutions that are available, and then what words to use when we go in and break the logic that they are basically unconsciously thinking with. We're all using logic, basic logic. So then we go in and we try to understand how this solution, this service is breaking logic. And then that's how we construct the contradiction.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's really strong. And yeah, I imagine it is such a subtle difference at times, right? Depending on who you're talking to, and finding those things. Again, it goes beyond, industry terminology. Like, yeah, sure, you should know that stuff. But these are digging into assumptions in an industry, right? That someone outside of that industry may not even have, right? Like, I wouldn't think in those terms with software necessarily at all. People in it every day, this is their lead. This is their, natural, if you do this, it has to be this. And then being able to make that contradiction and work. And I love that. Essentially definition, or that hypothesis you talk about of innovation, of what innovation actually is. And when you can, and sometimes that innovation, we look back on it as innovation because this product came out, it got adopted by a certain segment by everyone, whatever that may be, and almost the users, the people who bought it, whatever that was, almost defined it or defined what that innovation was along the way. And the idea for this is really understanding, well, I've got something innovative here. Let me make sure that I'm going to tell you why it's innovative in the beginning, and putting that in front and almost shortcut the need for this slow adoption. And I sure hope people finally get it and they start using it, and then they talk about it. Instead, here's how you talk about it. Here's why it's innovative. Here's why you want it. You know, when you can do the work for them, then it just, I imagine that skyrockets things.
Yeah. Steve Jobs was actually a master at this. I don't know that I don't know his thought process in creating some of his products messaging, but this framework, I created it from reverse engineering his statement, 1,000 songs in your pocket, which is what he used when he launched the first iPod in 2001. And that statement is not phenomenal because it's short, and it's not phenomenal because it's catchy. It's actually phenomenal because it's a contradiction. And that's what it took me a while to really figure out, because there are plenty of like really crisp, clear, understandable, articulate statements, that communicate what a product does, but they do not have the power to close someone in the first conversation or in that first encounter, to close before the demo. They pique interest, they create curiosity, but if we're trying to actually close before they even know any details about what our product or service is, it has to be a contradiction. So if we look at that statement, 1,000 songs in your pocket, the contradiction is that it's delivering an astronomical, for 2001, an astronomical amount of music in an insanely small space. And I'll use my phone as an example. So Steve Jobs holds up the iPod and says, "This puts 1,000 songs in your pocket." That was a contradiction. And if we're able to kind of suspend disbelief and kind of set aside, Apple's brilliant marketing machine and look purely at what this is saying, this is a turning point, because now for most people, 1,000 songs had to be carried on a hard drive or lots and lots of CDs and CD cases and cassette tapes. So the concept of now that's available in my pocket, that was the innovation breakthrough. Here's the other thing. So I've heard rumors that maybe the iPod wasn't the first MP3 player to be invented at that time, wasn't the only one on the market. Maybe there were others that also held 1,000 songs or a comparable amount of music. The difference is that Steve Jobs is the only one to come out with the contradiction and say 1,000 songs in your pocket. What did the other ones say? Did they talk about technical specifications? Did they talk about ease and portability, right? So there's a piece of this framework, which is that we don't use adjectives or any subjective language at all. We use a pure contradiction that has a binary true or false value. So 1,000 songs in your pocket, Steve Jobs stands up there, says this holds 1,000 songs in your pocket. Immediately you hear it and you know that statement is either true or false. Either it holds 1,000 songs or it doesn't. Either it fits in my pocket or it doesn't. And when you hear it, you know both of those things, 1 and 2, are easy, or hypothetically would be easy and immediate to prove right now. All you have to do is go grab an iPod and see if it really does it. Now, in the moment, you don't actually have to go grab the iPod to see if it really does it. Just knowing that you could, right, in that moment, knowing that you could verify it lets you know that you can. It's sort of a nuance, but it immediately, the statement sounds true because you know that you could verify it. And you know that Steve Jobs knows that you could verify it. Therefore, he wouldn't stand on stage making this crazy contradiction claim that tells you how to prove it false unless it were actually true. And that's what makes the contradiction not just a communicator of the quantum leap in value, but now it's communicating something that sounds impossible, but you also immediately believe it because it actually tells you how to fact check it in the moment. So that's another nuance to the framework as well.
I like that. And it instantly expands what's possible in that listener's mind, in that audience's mind. The fact that that's even possible now exists with that one statement, right? And it didn't a second before. Like it wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even think that way. And that's powerful.
That's why it blows people's minds when they hear it, right? So we're not trying to pique their interest. We're blowing their mind, right? And that's why my client's sales pipeline blew up, right? He's working not in the most exciting space, IT, asset management. I didn't know what that was. I knew what IT was kind of, but it's not super sexy, right? And then
man, that's what all the kids just want to be when when you ask the little ones, what do you want to be? IT asset management.
Exactly.
Like they're dressing up for that as Halloween. The amount of IT asset management costumes I saw last night. Oh man, through the roof.
Exactly. But and so it's an obscure piece of the industry, and it's not cheap, right? He was charging $75K. It's now $130K. His engagements, but it blew up. Why? Because he had this magical contradiction that also had built-in credibility, trustworthiness, because it has an obvious binary, true or false value, and people know in the moment that they can verify it. Does it help me spend less on software? Does it help me do that without buying less software? And of course, he has, I teach, the other piece of the framework is to have an immediate answer that answers both of those questions, because the response people will have, and this is how you know you've done it correctly, when you take what you think is your close before the demo statement or your contradiction statement. I should say, just for ease of use, I call this a viral product pitch. That's the actual name, is a viral product pitch. When you have your viral product pitch or your viral service pitch, and or what you think that your pitch is, and you use it with a potential customer, the response should be how. It shouldn't really be like, oh, that's nice, or that's interesting. It should just immediately be how, meaning how the hell do you do that? So some version of how, and like an amazed how. And then you have your answer to the two questions raised by the statement.
Yeah, because I would imagine that's like there's no other response. If this is working, there's no other response that should come next besides how do you do that? Exactly. Or I don't believe you. How do you do that? Whatever that, but it's that version of it, right?
It wouldn't be I don't believe you. It would just be how. Because to your point with the I don't believe you. So
I was thinking the mind-blowing aspect, I guess, but yeah.
Because the statement sounds both impossible, because it's a logical contradiction, but it also sounds true. It has something that I call obvious believability, which is what I explained about, like, when people hear it, they know exactly how to fact check it because it tells them how to fact check it. And they know in the moment they can do it very quickly. So that's why they believe it, even without actually fact checking it. And that's why there's nothing left for them to say except how, because now they're taking the steps to verify it, but also they're just curious and they need to know. So it's kind of a mind blown effect.
Yeah. So let's address. There's a couple of aspects I want to go through with this. Is addressing, the folks who are listening, watching, and they're bought in. Like, yeah, absolutely. That's great for Apple. It's great for this IT guy. My product, I just don't have that. That differentiator, that crazy, oh my gosh, this is so different. And I know you have an answer for those, and that's exactly why you you talked about that. And we have a nice harsh answer for that. But let's dive into that a little bit, because really that's what's great about this framework too, is if you don't have it or you just don't think you do, that's problem number one with your business, right?
It's not necessarily a problem. So this framework is for people who have breakthrough products and services, groundbreaking, exceptional, and they know it because these people have what I call the explanation problem. So there's a specific kind of pain that comes from knowing you have an amazing, amazing product or service, and you can't explain it to people. You explain it and they don't get it. That's a very specific kind of pain. And so, and almost every client, every client that I work with has this pain. They have this problem, the explanation problem. If only I could explain this the right way for people to get it, I would have all the sales that I should be getting. That's what this framework is for. So you have a breakthrough solution, but the bottleneck in your sales process is that nobody gets it. They don't see the value, or they think they get it, but they're not buying, which means they actually don't get it, because if they did, they would be buying, no question, because it's just so much better than any other option they have, right? 1, 2, and 3, what we talked about before. So it's not really for solutions that are kind of on par with everything else, just a little bit better than whatever else is out there. It really has to be like a quantum leap in value, head and shoulders above everything else for this too. And the reason for that is to find the contradiction. It's easiest, and I'm not going to say you can't find a contradiction for a service that's only marginally better than everything else, but a truly deep innovation has a really big contradiction at the center of it. And it's just easier and faster to find if it's that level of innovation. And there's typically going to be a huge leap in value that I'm able to create for my client, because now they're going to, with just one turn of phrase, immediately fill their sales pipeline. I had and it works, again, I said it depends on the metrics that matter to you, but I had another client who was an early stage startup, pre-revenue, hadn't even built their technology. We found their viral product pitch, their close before the demo statement, and they got a 60% conversion rate just using that statement with their target customers. People were like, how does this work? This is incredible. That's exactly what I want. Like, and they hadn't built the technology yet. It was still in development, but that was great because there had actually been another big player that had entered the space with a huge Series A round. It's a very crowded space. So they're in the health tech field. So they have like a nutrition platform that helps people with managing nutrition and that sort of thing. And that's a huge space. The health and nutrition space is huge, but their product is very powerful, very innovative, hasn't been done before. And so we were able to find that contradiction. And that's really kind of the requirement, is that there has to be something proprietary, some secret sauce, something that nothing else has, that you have, your solution has, that enables it to just to kind of break through the status quo of the industry and create solutions and value and outcomes that haven't been seen before. So,
and that's fair, certainly in terms of, I understand what you're saying too. Like, you don't necessarily, to be successful in business or anything like that, you have to have that crazy breakthrough. I guess where I'm coming from with it is, in my opinion, you should be striving, you should be heading that direction. It should be concerning to you if this doesn't fit for your business because you don't have that thing that's separating you. Because if you don't, why is anybody buying from you? If you don't have that thing, if you don't have that answer to the question, well, why you instead of them? Well, that's a long, painful road that you're going down.
And that's probably that's why a lot of sales is very challenging. But you can actually, if this is something that resonates, this idea of like the breakthrough innovation and the contradiction and sort of closing clients before they even know what your service is, then consider baking it in as you develop your solution, building in a contradiction. What is that high priority problem you solve? It has to be a high priority. So the problem you solve cannot be something that you have to educate your customer about, because that creates a sales process. It can't be something they don't know about, because that elongates the sales process, because now you're walking up the hill trying to convince people that they need something they don't know about, wasn't on their radar. and then to convince them that you're the best solution, which is again hitting number 2, and then to convince them why they should pay for it. And it wasn't even on their radar. So you can see why there's a lot of calories burned in doing that.
Yeah, that's the widest funnel possible, right? You're trying to, oh my gosh. Yeah.
And that's what my client was struggling with. He was trying to educate people about IT asset management, the opportunities it created for them, and then try to get them to work with him. But he also has an exceptional service. And so when we identified what that contradiction is, he doesn't have to walk up any hills. Like, people come rolling down the hill to him. Like, he just says, yeah, I do this. I'll help you spend less on software without buying less software. And then immediately, but
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that criticism, I'll call it criticism because I'm doing it. So, I'm turning that on myself because I look at this and I'm struggling. I'm in love with it. I love the framework, right? And I want that thing, right? So I'm looking at it for myself of like, okay, so how do I reverse engineer and use this framework as a figuring out to maybe, just a better single main offer of mine, right? And part of that comes through client research, right? What is that giant pain point? Answering those first couple of things that they know they need help with.
We can actually do this without client research. So let's jump into it. So,
okay.
First ingredient is a high priority problem, a problem they're already hot to solve. You don't need to educate them about it. You just say it and they're like, oh my goodness, I need a solution to that, right? High priority problem. Now, a contradiction is basically how are you delivering a solution to that problem in a way that it contradicts logic and it goes against basic logic. So it's not about pain points or anything like that. What you need to do is identify the high priority problem that your target client already considers a priority. Once you have that problem, we're going to construct the contradiction based on that. So,
just because I want to make sure I grab it too. So, is it always a problem that you're solving, or is it a desired result that we know they want?
Really good question. It's actually the desired result. So, but that comes from the problem. So with my client, so the problem was our budget is out of control, right? The desired result was to spend less on software. So that's actually a really great point. And that's a nuance. From the problem, you want to identify the desired result that they want. And that's what you build the contradiction around. So in that case, spend less on software. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you have to buy less software, you have to cut back on your usage, you got to do this, this, and this. All the things that logically means. And then you identify the one that is a clear contradiction that would sound like weird or magical if you could do that, and then figure out a way to do that. So in that case, it's spend less without buying less.
Yeah, because I struggle. So, what I came up with, even when I saw your presentation the other day, was like not a good one, but like I was heading down that road. And that's why like I'm turning it on myself in terms of like, okay, if you don't have a good one, I think you need to dig, right? So like a desired result would be experience, for experienced coaches and consultants, right? That I work with is more clients coming to them, right?
Okay. So what would you say the high priority problem is? Is just like struggle to get sales or leads or
constantly chasing unqualified prospects.
Okay. So it can, so that desired result is something I call a basic result. So that's what we build the contradiction around. So it sounds like, and it's going to be hard to do on the fly because there's usually a ton of questions I ask people, but let's play with it for a tiny bit. So it might be something like get clients or get leads. And then you would look at what does that logically mean? So one way, and that particular industry might be tricky, but one thing off the top of my head might be get clients without talking to anyone, or what's involved in getting clients. You got to talk to people, prospect, get leads, all of that, and then find the one that would be the biggest contradiction for your target customer, which is also what I would want to dig into, like, who is your exact target customer? Is it a certain type of client or consultant or coach? So for me, it's people with breakthrough products and services. So it's not just anyone, it's that particular, because that's who my framework works best for. It's very difficult for me personally to do the framework if it's not a breakthrough service, but if it is or could be, if it even could be, if you have a feeling it might be, I think I have something like that, and I would like to find a contradiction. Then that's typically a good indicator that you might. But if you're like, nah, I don't think I do, then probably not. But that's my target. So, but for you, we'd need to hone in on that, because then we could look at what logic would seem most basic to them about how to get this result. So
yeah, because that's what I had listed out in the past, just when creating the whole offer, right? Is not having to chase unqualified folks, not have, they're experienced coaches, consultants. They've got an established practice, and they know that if they just had more conversations with people who, if they could just put what they do in front of more people.
Interesting. Okay. So one interesting quirk of a breakthrough service is that the thing that makes it difficult to explain is often the thing that's the key to explaining it in the right way so that you get more sales. So is there any part of your service that's sort of hard for you to communicate to your target customer, like where it takes more sort of time and effort to really communicate that this is what your service is?
A little bit. The lengthy part, like, they get the need for, a video podcast like this in general, right? But the very specific aspect of either a completely done for you version of it, or that the way we structure it and focus it so that you're talking to your ideal clients on this show, not just creating content to float out there. So that's the explaining part of, like, putting into their head that this is about this interaction right here, one-on-one. Everything else is icing. You could go throw this in the trash if you wanted to, and it would still be valuable because you had that conversation.
With the guest. So you're saying just the fact that they're having a conversation with that guest.
Exactly, because it's either their ideal client or it's a strategic partner who has an audience of their ideal client. It's that relationship that gets built. The show is a tool, a mechanism to this system and process of getting clients coming to them.
And would you say that this tool is faster or easier than any other option that they have for getting the same result?
Yeah, I mean, it's instant, right? Like, it's you get the call, you get the meeting faster than anything else because, hey, I'd like to have you on my show. Awesome. Yes, I'm there. Right? Rather than, I'd like to talk to you for half an hour about a thing I have for you.
So it's kind of like a stealth sales call, but it is a podcast, but it's also a stealth sales call with an actual ideal client. And build the relationship.
Yeah, and especially when it's done with, like, you're giving value right away, right? Because for that guest, it's something they can take and go use.
Exactly.
Yeah, it validates them.
Yeah, that definitely. And most of your clients aren't familiar with this. They haven't thought of podcasts in this way.
Most not. Most it's it's an easy understanding because, oh yeah, sure, a show, I get it. But it's not like, okay, but this is not how we're using it to do this thing. And I've gone back and forth from leading with, like, hey, we've got this solution to get more clients that happens to be a show, to, hey, we've got the show, here's what we do with it. We use it to get more clients.
Yeah. So if I were looking at this and there's like a lot more information I want to know, but it feels like it's almost like it's not about the podcast. Because, like, remember my client, it wasn't about the IT asset management. It was about the basic result. So book a sales call without having to pitch it, or book a sales call with any with any client you want. It's almost like that's the contradiction. Like,
Mm.
it's
Yeah,
like a
sales call
sales
when they
call
don't.
that they want to do. And then it's like, well, how do you do that? Well, actually, your sales call is a podcast. You start a podcast and then you have conversations with them. And that conversation really is a sales call because you're communicating value to them, but you're also giving value to them because they can use the conversation, they can use the sales call for their target audience. So you see how you shift the frame. So you're not talking about
Yeah.
a podcast. Podcast is mechanism. That's technically what it is. But what they care about, their logical frame of reference is I need sales calls, I need leads, I need revenue. So you got to speak in that language. That's again, that's off the top of my
Yeah.
head. So that's a super rough sketch. But does
No,
that
but
kind
that's the
of,
right, yeah,
yeah.
direction for sure. Because then they get to demonstrate their value to that guest too, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
an audience and that guest audience and stuff, and that's sort of again icing. But they get to not just even just a sales call, but it's almost a. I mean, depending on what they do
Mm-hmm.
in their line of work, they could take that guest through part of that process, right? And then
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
demonstrate that. And so I think that goes right along with what you're saying too. I like that a lot of just that's the thing to focus on. It's I know other people have talked about the invisible sales funnel, right? That idea of
Mm-hmm.
they're in this sales funnel, they don't even know it, right? So
Mm.
there I think
Yeah.
there's something laying in there that where you're going with that for sure.
Yeah. I think if you frame it that way and find the contradiction around sales calls or whatever is most valuable to your customer. So if sales calls isn't the most valuable thing, what is that most valuable thing? And then how is your podcast the background mechanism to bring them more of that thing, right? And that's where you
Yeah.
start looking at it. It can be kind of trippy, right? Because people are like, but I do podcasts. It's like, no, you don't. What your customer cares about is this. So you do that. And podcast is just how you do it. Find the contradiction, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
And
that's really
that's
interesting.
yeah, and I think, putting the work on me, I think is there too to that's where I think the client research does come into play a little bit in terms of what is that most important? Which one is more important? Is it building this brand so that
Mm.
clients come to them, or is it I just need more calls? I just need more sales calls. I just need to be on the phone with more people. It's sort of, and that's on me as
Yeah,
a business
that's a
owner, kind of figuring
decision.
that out.
Yeah, yeah. And those might actually just be two different target clients, and then it's a matter of choosing. Well, which one am
Sure,
I more excited about? Do I want to do this one
right?
or this one? So that's also, but yeah, that's pretty cool. It's
Yeah,
pretty
but
cool.
I like those things. That helps, because I think going along this, I get the core concept, but again, I love the idea of using this framework to create that category of one that nobody else is doing.
And what's
And
crazy is even if you're not the only one using podcasts in this way or with this service, if you come to a prospect with the contradiction and it's something that you know that your target audience has never heard before, your target customer hasn't heard before, you will get the same quantum leap in interest in your leads, sales, revenue, etc. Because
yeah,
they haven't heard it before. There could be literally your next door neighbor could be doing the same thing, but talking about it as podcasts. But you're not talking about it as podcasts. You're talking about it as a contradiction. You'll do better, faster, um,
yeah,
because of
that's a
that.
great point.
Yeah.
Because they're tuning out the podcast because they've got that in a box. They've got it in a
They're
category
like,
of that's
yeah,
what
I don't
that thing
need that. I'll
is.
do that later. It's not urgent, right? That's why we want to make sure it's the urgent problem they care about, the urgent result that they want to get. And everything is reframed as a delivery, as a way to deliver that. And the
Yeah,
contradiction communicates that. And then, of
yeah,
course, the value, the ROI is built in because you help me do what without like I just get this. It's basically something for nothing, which I didn't mention. Sorry about that. So every contradiction to your target customer should feel like something for nothing. That's why it feels like magic. So um, another example, for another product example, is the Ring Video Doorbell. So at the core of that innovation is answer the door without being home. At the time, that felt like something for nothing. So I can answer my front door, but I'm not physically at home. Something for nothing. How am I doing that? Right? Then, then you get to say, well, it's Wi-Fi enabled, phone monitoring system, and you can do it all from your phone. You can get video, all of that. But none of that matters until you've told them the something for nothing. Something for nothing captures that something for nothing contradiction captures what the innovation really is. Then they will sit and listen and hang on your every word as you explain exactly how it works. And that's the magic, because that's what started happening for my clients.
I just love it. And that's why I'm a big believer in, like, if you're not striving to find that thing, I don't know what you're doing. I mean, that it's just, chasing crumbs, I guess, like, and it's a big world. There's plenty of, things that you can do. And there's plenty of examples of, somebody making a widget that just does this a little bit cheaper, and that's fine. I think in this world, like who you're targeting, but I think more people than give themselves credit for could take this and use it to dig into, work with you, dig into the fact that there's something here, because they are struggling to explain it, or just explain it differently. What I'm doing potentially, I mean, I can explain it all day long. They get it. The video podcast, I do it for you. Okay, cool. I'll see you later. I mean, like, that's not hard to explain, but as we dug in, as we showed people, like, there's a way to approach this, and maybe I add something to the service or something. Somebody listening to this goes, "Oh, that's easy for me. I never thought about doing that. If I just do this along with my main thing, there's my contradiction statement. There's my this. There's the mind blow. And so I just encourage people to sort of open up to that, rather than going, "Oh, well, I don't really have this thing that's necessarily hard to explain or that different, so I'm not going to go and have a conversation." Instead, I think, jumping in with somebody like you who can, and I don't want to, I'm not sending unqualified people to you either. You know what I mean? Because you've got your.
I love talking to people and helping how
I can. But I know you've got that, and I just encourage people to have that mind shift. Hopefully, just hearing that framework, they have that same reaction that I did, of like, oh, that's the stuff,
And I want to jump in and just make one note. So what you do is straightforward, but what's interesting about this, what's powerful about this, is that you don't just do a podcast show, we do it for you, right? Like, it's not really what you do. That's the mechanism. And if you have a contradiction and you lead with that, you say that to your target client and they hear it, then when you reveal how you do that, it will still sound amazing, because it's going to hook into this frame of reference you've already led with, this contradictory something for nothing frame of reference. And they're going to hear it, but they're not going to hear it the way they would have heard it if you just led with, I have a video podcast, I do it for you, right? But now the mechanism being video podcast, and that's how they get this something for nothing, is like, whoa, I never thought of that way. Wow. And so I can just get all of this through that. And you're like, yeah. And you're like, oh, by the way, I do it for you, right? It just gets better and better. And that's why it contextualizes things in a very powerful way. And it's not superficial. It really isn't. Like, what you're doing, if it's better than anything else, it really is phenomenal. And just, I want to say that to you and everyone on this, don't downplay it, right? In the right context, you will blow people's minds. You do it all day, every day. I get it. But in the right context, you will blow people's minds. You will have impact. You will have people saying, I would crawl through glass to help you, because your product or service really is transformational. And so you kind of owe it to your target customers to communicate that to them, so that they get it and they want it, and they're like, let's go, And of course that's great for you, And so,
Certainly. But I do love that distinction because we do that all the time, right?
yeah,
It's something that comes easy to us. It's not that big a deal. We've done it for 30 years, whatever, right?
yeah,
And that really is a great distinction. Plus the one, you made at the very beginning. This is not a fancy headline. This isn't a hook. This isn't clickbait.
mhm,
The thumbnail that you're putting together. This is a true, substantial statement that really does it. Your product or service delivers on that. That you're grabbing people with. And it's something that is that powerful that it's worth the time to dig in. It's worth the time
yeah,
to devote to
mhm,
figuring this thing out, having a
yeah,
conversation with you, hiring you, jumping in and
yeah,
going like getting into because it really does. Even this conversation has helped me go from hearing your presentation and going like, oh, that's a really cool framework. I'm gonna go, put some thought to this a little bit,
yeah,
and then really digging into it, going like, oh yeah, okay, I understand this now, and there's a subtlety here. Okay, that
yeah,
distinction,
yeah,
that's really strong. So I love what
yeah.
you're
Well,
doing.
thank you. Yeah.
How
I
can
love
how
it
can
too.
people reach out? I think you've very well defined who should reach out, and I've
Yeah,
shaken a few people that they better.
yeah.
Uh, what's the best way to reach out to you?
People can find me on LinkedIn. You can send me a direct message, and I should have some, my about section. There should be some contact info there as well. And so that's probably the easiest way.
Perfect. Yeah, everybody, listening, watching, check out the show notes at strategyactionshow.com. You'll
Yeah.
find her episode, all her details right there. Thank you so much for
Yes,
being
thank you for
on.
having me. This is
This has
awesome.
been fantastic. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of this show. If you want help creating authority building video content or even a client generating show of your own, go to MediaLeadsCo.com and let's connect. I'll talk to you soon on the next Strategy in Action.